All praises, all praises, all praises to the heavenly, holy, almighty creator of infinity, eternity, the universe, and all there is. This is Revelations.unveiled.detroit. Hello, family. We are back together again in our consensual assembly of peace, harmony, safety, and joy, where we are converging and convening in this wonderful convocation so that we may continue to review and share historical information for the hidden and holy nation. All praises. And to the scattered tribes of the house of Jacob, as well as the brothers and sisters of the world, the melanated and Moors, the original man and children of God, the sovereigns and sojourners, the copper-colored, the colored and people of color, the aboriginals and indigenous, the natives, Negroes, and niggas, the African Americans and blacks, the descendants of slaves, and those conquered and colonized. Oh yes, we are blessed, and we are here where we can continue our wonderful immersion into our identity, our true nationality, our culture, all of those things denied to us in this common curriculum, in this carnal captivity that we faced in our current social and political status. And so, family, tonight we are adding a supplement to our slave trade series, where we will be expanding on some of the Hebrew existence within the continent of Africa. And this presentation this evening, family, is dedicated to the brothers and sisters out there who are attached to the sentiment and the spirit of us being Africans, or from the so-called motherland, or of the Hamitic tribes. And so for the brothers out there, the sonnetters and the young pharaohs and the dagger squads and all those of the Ankh and the Egyptologists and the Hamitic science lovers, this is a little information to add into your scholarly deliberation and consideration for all of the diversity of the diaspora that resides upon the continent known as Africa. And so, family, tonight's presentation is entitled Hebrew Israelite Communities in Ancient West Africa. And so, as always, we imbue the spirit of the Revelations.unveiled.detroit channel standards in the book of Malachi chapters 3 verse 6, as well as Hebrews chapter 13 verse 8. Those are our standards in which we abide in our study, in our reflection, in our absorption, and our application of the holy anointed word as given to us by the holy anointed creator. And we begin. Although many of us have not been taught this, the Hebrew Israelite existence is rooted deeply in Africa. Two French travelers in the 18th century, Conrad Maltby-Brun and James Gates Percival, traveled around Africa during the time of the slave trade and documented the tribes in Africa. While traveling through the Kingdom of Loanga, which is present-day Congo, they came across Black Judeans. All right, family, so right here we're going to introduce some language, some distinctions of labels and categorizations of peoples. So we, as the people brought here, the ADOS, the American descendants of slaves, we are the biblical Israelites as outlined in the Holy Scriptures. The books of Leviticus chapter 26 and the book of Deuteronomy chapter 28. We are the Israelites The Israelite nation is broken down into 12 distinct tribes. So when you hear the word Jews, it is actually 3 tribes consisting of the tribe of Judah, the king tribe, the tribe of Benjamin, and the tribe of Levi, the priest tribes of the nation of Israel. So Jews represents those 3 tribes, as they were the common population during the time of Christ, before the Roman persecution and overthrow of Jerusalem in 70 AD. So, not to be confused with the word Jewish, which are the European counterfeit converts to the religion of Judaism. We are Israelites. We have no religion. Our culture and heritage and foundation is the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Holy Scripture. And we continue. In their book, A System of Universal Geography, or A Description of All Parts of the World, they write, the kingdom of Loanga contains black Jews scattered throughout the country. They are despised by the Negroes, who do not even deign to eat with them. They are occupied in trade and keep the Sabbath so strictly that they do not even converse on that day. And they have a separate burying ground, very far from any habitation. The tombs are constructed with masonry and ornamented with Hebrew inscriptions. The European Jewish newspaper, known as the Haaretz, published documents from a Portuguese traveler who wrote about what he saw in the nation of Senegal during the time of the slave trade. The Portuguese traveler said this: some of the people here believe in Muhammad, but the majority are idol worshippers, wrote the nameless Portuguese navigator. In this land, there are Jews known as Gauls, and they are black like the rest of the inhabitants. But they have no synagogues and do not conduct Jewish ceremonies, or Judean ceremonies, or Hebrew ceremonies, which are the correct terms. They do not live with the other blacks, but separately, he reported. Because they do not dare enter the villages, they locate themselves behind the houses of the ruler of the village, and at dawn they sing his praises until he grants them portions of millet, and then they go. If they didn't do so, the rest of the blacks would not tolerate them. So great is the other blacks' hatred for them, which forbids them from entering any house except for that of the ruler of the village. If they find them inside the village, they are beaten with sticks. All right, family. So we have 2 nations. We have ancient Loanga, which is the common day nation of the Congo, where there was a distinct tribe of black Jews living amongst the native populations. And now we have a brief outline of the black Judeans who lived in the nation of Senegal amongst the other native Africans. And so they're distinguishing between the blacks and Negroes and these Jews. So all of these same colored people of different nations are living on the same continent. We continue. The uninformed writers of the Haaretz article try to make the claim that because these Judeans in the document did not practice Hebrew customs, they were not really Jews. The most likely reason why the tribe didn't practice Hebrew traditions is because many Israelites were scattered and lost their culture and identity during their persecution. Also, this document is important because it shows how much the Israelites were hated by the native African populations. This also helps debunk the myth that Africans sold other Africans. They both were African, but two different nations. The local West Africans helped sell Israelites who migrated from Israel, also known as Northeast Africa. All right, family, that was a nice, meaty piece of information where the writer is giving you clarity on the distinction between the Hebrew Israelites living in Africa and the actual African natives, where they dispelled the myth that it was Africans selling other Africans in slavery when it was actually the native Africans selling Israelites into slavery. A historical account from the 1700s describes the connection between West Africans and the Israelites. This account is from an African man from the Igbo tribe of Nigeria named Alaudo Equiano. He was kidnapped from Nigeria and was enslaved in Barbados and Virginia. He was somehow able to purchase his freedom and went on to become a writer and abolitionist. In his autobiography, he not only documented the horrors of slavery, but he also wrote about his culture back home during the slave trade. He detailed how his tribe practiced the same customs of the Jews in the Hebrew Bible called the Torah, as spoken by Equiano. We practiced circumcision like the Jews and made offerings and feasts on that occasion in the same manner as they did. Such is the imperfect sketch my memory has furnished me with of the manners and customs of a people among whom I first drew my breath. And here I cannot forbear suggesting what has long struck me very forcibly, namely the strong analogy which even by this sketch, imperfect as it is, appears to prevail in the manners and customs of my countrymen and those of the Jews. Before they reached the land of promise, and particularly the patriarchs, while they were yet in that pastoral state which is described in Genesis. He continues, like the Israelites in their primitive state, our government was conducted by our chiefs or judges, or wise men and elders, and the head of a family with us enjoyed a similar authority over his household with that which is ascribed to Abraham and the other patriarchs. The law of retaliation obtained almost universally with us as with them, and even their religious practices appear to have shed upon us a ray of its glory, though broken and spent in its passage, or eclipsed by the cloud with which time, tradition, and ignorance might have enveloped it. For we had our circumcision, which was a rule, I believe, peculiar to our people. We had also our sacrifices and burnt offerings, our washings and purifications on the same occasions as they had. All right, family. So that was a documentation by a Nigerian man, Alaudo Equiano, a very famous historical figure who outlined in his book and was giving us those strings back to the actual culture we descend from. We are not Africans. Continuing. Ibu Jews in Nigeria. For whatever reason, a White House memo dated Tuesday, January 28, 1969, to President Nixon, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger described the Igbos as the wandering Jews of West Africa, gifted, aggressive, westernized, at best envied and resented, but mostly despised by their neighbors in the Federation. Okay? This quote shows how the Igbo tribe has gained a national reputation for its Hebrew characteristics. According to 17th century Arabic historical documents called Tariq al-Fatash and the Tariq al-Sudan, many Hebrew communities existed throughout West Africa. The Tariq es-Sudan, recorded by Abdurrahman bin Abdallah es-Sadi, translated by O. Hudas, stated that a Jewish community was formed by a group of Egyptian Jews who had traveled to the West Africa land through Chad. The historian Leon Africanus traveled throughout the south of the Sahara in Africa and came across many Black Hebrew communities. Sir Leo Africanus outlines in his book, pages 78 through 81 of Della Descrizione dell'Africa per Giovanni. So that was his book. And the question is then asked, family, why is this information not known? And one of the answers is the religious persecution of those people in the land from the native Africans, as well as the invading Islamic armies. So a lot of these people were captured in these wars, the wars between the Arabic armies, the native African tribes, and they were taken as political prisoners or prisoners of war and then sold to other Arabs or the European. In 1492, the Emperor Askia Muhammad came to power in Mali, the nation of Mali, the previously tolerant region of Timbuktu, and decreed that Jews must convert to Islam or leave. Practicing Hebrew customs became illegal in Mali. In 1526, the historian Leo Africanus again writes, the king Askia is a declared enemy of the Jews. He will not allow any to live in the city. If he hears it said that a Berber merchant frequents them or does business with them, he confiscates their goods. Okay, so we see the hostility and the angst and agitation against the Hebrews from all of the surrounding communities for which they're located. All right. Today, many Israelites are still living in Africa. In 2016, a French Jewish filmmaker named Laurent Gavron made a film called Black Jews, The Roots of an Olive Tree. So family, remember, he was Jewish, so this was one of those European converts who made this film. In the film, he documents Hebrew tribes in Africa. What inspired Gavron to make the film was a book written by Edith Bruder called The Black Jews of Africa: History, Identity, and Religion. In sub-Saharan Africa, you can find Judaic tribes in Ghana, Nigeria, Mali, Uganda, Cameroon, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and even in Sao Tome and other countries, Bruder said. Many of the black Hebrew tribes that were documented in the film claim that their ancestors migrated from Israel and Yemen. These West African countries that have Hebrew communities are the same countries that African Americans, quote unquote, were kidnapped from during the slave trade across the Atlantic. Again, the same African countries that, quote unquote, African Americans trace their ancestry back to contain Hebrew Israelite tribes and communities. Israelite tribes have been found in countries that are not listed above. In his book, The Great Roman Jewish War, there's that word Jewish, pages 66 through 70, the Roman historian Flavius Josephus stated over thousands of years ago. Flavius Josephus states Flavius Josephus states over thousands of years that Israelites migrated into Africa. He writes, General Vespasian and his son Caesar Titus fought against the Jews. Millions of Jews fled into Africa, among other places, fleeing from Roman persecution and starvation during the siege. All right, family, so that was a part of history where the Romans had surrounded the Jewish country or kingdom and built a trench and starved out the inhabitants over a 7-year period, and then went in and committed mass slaughter against the holy people of the book. This event would explain the beginning of the migration of Jews from Israel to West Africa. In the 90s, a black Hebrew tribe called the Limba that resides in Zimbabwe had their DNA tested in a study done by the Center for Genetic Anthropology at the University College of London. The DNA test confirmed, as the Limba had stated, the same DNA sequences as the Israelite priests that many believe to be the descendants of Aaron, the brother of Moses. The results from the study means that the Limba tribe shared the same DNA as the ancient Israelites. A DNA study done on Sephardic Jews, those are Jews that resided in Spain, by family tree DNA, show that the DNA sequences that are found in predominantly sub-Saharan Africans and African Americans were present during the formation of the ancient Israelites. Due to the fact that the DNA evidence links black people to Israel is such a point, I listed, or the citation is listed at the bottom of the article. So family, basically it's a reiteration that the Hebrew tribes in Africa that were mentioned throughout the various countries, which were Ghana, Nigeria, Mali, Uganda, Cameroon, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Sao Tome, the Congo. These are the only ones they found so far, so there are many more to be identified. And once again, Family, the world knows who we are. The real Africans that come over to the American shores, they know who we are. That is why the relationship between the quote unquote African Americans and the true Africans of the continent is strained, is questionable, doesn't seem authentic. They know they are not our people. We are the chosen people. Our plight through the sub-Saharan and Atlantic slave trade, as well as the trade that went into the Far East and into the European continent, is biblical prophecy. We are the people of the book. And the White House knows about the Igbos of West Africa, which are, quote, the wandering Jews who are gifted, aggressive, westernized, at best envied, but resented, and mostly despised by their neighbors in the surrounding federations. So family, this was a supplement to our slave trade series. It was to give us more history where we can call from the history of the navigators, the slave traders, the inhabitants of these ancient Western and Central African nations who contain large populations of Hebrew Israelite communities. These communities were persecuted. They were forced to convert to pagan religions and Islam. They were attacked. They were resented. And those are the traits outlined in our Holy Scripture that is stated would be the surrounding world's feeling of us. It is of the jealousy of us being the chosen. And so family, please share this information. Please like it. Let's get this information to our brothers whose mind is bored to the core with the sensibilities of being native Africans, of the Hamitic sciences, of the Nubian knowledges, and all sorts of other theologies. Just because we are the same color does not mean we are the same people. And so family, to my ADOS family, or better yet, my IADOS family, Israelite American descendants of slaves, we shall continue with filling up our menu of knowledge and wiping away the smoke of darkness and ignorance. We shall reconvene. We shall reconverge. We shall gather together in love, education, and truth. Until we are together again, I love you. I love you. I love you. This was Hebrew Israelites in ancient West African civilizations. This is revelations.unveiled.detroit. Have a wonderful existence, family.